Des, I believe that you had a case recently at Landlord Defence where a landlord had received an enforcement notice relating to quite a lot of bad stuff like unsafe electrics, fire detection systems not correct, gas safety certificate not in place, deposits not secured, and the residents were calling the council on a very, very regular basis, and finally the landlord got a prohibition order. Then, thankfully, he had the sense to call Landlord's Defence. What did you guys do?
So the situation was not complex, but it was interesting. The owner of the property was quite an old person, and their son or daughter was managing the property and dealing with a rent-to-rent landlord. And the rent-to-rent landlord had not done the things that were required in the property. And one of the residents, one of the occupants, was calling the council about the issues they were having in the property. And the council had come and asked for certain works to be done. The works that required a complete rewiring of the property because there hadn't been an electrical installation certificate done, so the condition wasn't seen. When that was done, they also were required then to put in an early warning fire detection system, which also the electrician did. Then a gas safety certificate was required. Now, this was all while the house was in occupation from, I believe, the August or September, and this was happening around the December time. So, looking forward, they decided to call us because they'd had this prohibition order, and I was, at the time, I was actually with Airbnb in Paris, where I was fortunate to be the founders of Airbnb, which gave me great insight to short-term letting. But that's not what we're talking about today.
Actually, just can I stop you and ask you to explain what a prohibition order actually means?
It's when the council is going to remove the occupants within the next 28 days from the property.
Right, so very serious.
Very serious, or take over management. And I guess they didn't want to take over management. So they were about to do this when I got the call, and I said, look, I'll be back in a couple of days. First thing I did on the Monday morning was get in touch with the council. Went through the process of what they were doing, why they were doing it, and what their story was. I looked at it, I spoke with the rent-to-rent landlord, who was also an occupant in the property, gathered some of the stories and some of the actions he'd taken, and realised, one, he hadn't already applied for the licence. Although he was doing the work, he should have at that time applied for the licence. Two, he wasn't doing what he was required to do. And three, he was going to get a massive fine, and so was the owner. But there was another story which I won't go into, a tale of woe, that when I then went to see the owner of the property, he was about to go into hospital for his something like multiple heart bypass or condition operation, had a conversation with him and said, what do you want? And he said, I just want the problem to go away. So at that point, I worked with the rent-to-rent landlord, arranged for him to remove himself from the property immediately. He took residence, I believe, with his mother a few days later. I then went and met with all the occupants in the property, interviewed each and every one of them. Then I also found out that they'd all paid deposits which had not been registered with the deposit protection schemes.
So this rent-to-rent landlord's sounding a bit of a nightmare at this point.
Yeah. And they then, having gathered all the information, presented to the local council what I had gathered, but in a way that represented a solution that they could work with rather than them continue what they were doing. When I explained the health condition of the landlord, the fact that although he was in a situation that he probably could have done something about it if he wasn't ill, that this person was an inexperienced person who had no training as a landlord, as many landlords don't, even though he was a rent-to-renter. He was on a dream path, and it had all got too much for him. And I explained that, although unconfirmed, some of the things that may have been happening in his mind may not have been the healthiest. And I'll just leave it to your imagination to work out what that means. And so I arranged with them to find somebody else, somebody who was completely trained in how to run an HMO, somebody who knew and understood how to do rent to rent, and somebody who was prepared to sit down with this person and me and to go through every person in the property's agreements. We then negotiated with the occupants to surrender their tenancies and exchange them for new agreements. And because the deposits had not been protected, we worked with them so that they would no longer need to have a deposit.
Right, yeah.
And credited them with 1 month's free rent at the end of their new agreement, which they were happy with, while at the same time working with the owner and the new rent-to-rent landlord to put in a proper agreement between them, because the agreement they had also was very suspicious. As a result of that, we were able to work with the council, and because there was a solution which took away the problem and removed the person that was the problem, and they were considerate of the owner's position, they were happy to go with that. No fines, no enforcement, a total solution put in place, which would require the installation of some fire doors and a few other things that needed to be done, a few other protection things, some thumb turn locks, etc., as you would expect.
But that's the sort of things that you at Landlord's Defence would be advising landlords to put in anyway.
Absolutely. And there was mould in some of the rooms, so some work needed to be done there. They were hanging wet clothes, etc. So the installation of a tumble dryer that they could be used, so in the cold weather this problem wasn't happening, and a few little things working out and working some stuff with the arrears with the utility suppliers, getting those paid off and all of those things. So it was quite complex, but at the end of the day that person did not get prosecuted either, but they became known to the council, so any applications they would make would be seen as a not fit and proper person, and they were noted on, I'm not going to call it a secret register, but I'm sure every council has a list of people that, although not prosecuted, when their names come across the table, they do further investigation. So it was exciting, it was interesting, and probably one of the toughest negotiations that we've ever had to do.
That's a very complex situation for one little HMO, and interesting, a very holistic approach, actually taking the rent-to-rent landlord out and bringing in a new fit and proper landlord to do the job. Success for the owner who's not well, success for the council, and the guy who was doing it badly didn't get prosecuted but won't get to do it again.
That's right.
Fantastic solution. Dan.
Absolutely. And I hate to tell you, as a landlord, if you are doing a rent-to-rent contract, please make sure the people that are doing it properly. Please make sure that they understand what their responsibilities are, their responsibilities to you. And the most important thing is that at the end of the day, they are complying with all the regulations.
Thank you, Des.